We on the air and in your hair.
On the air and yeah, well, we won't go there.
So, episode 4 for the 10th of February,
Yes.
2024. As you can see, I have my regalia on.
Well, yeah, we've got our hoodies. I guess that's good.
Oh, well, hoodies. Are you going to go and scare people with your hoodie?
Well, apparently I do that normally. I don't have to wear any special regalia to do that. So
Well, this is, I said earlier, this is Super Bowl weekend. This
it
is
is.
Saturday, so we don't know who's going to win tomorrow. But
Well, if we did,
these guys aren't in it. I have this hat because we're just across the river from where these guys play.
Well, we're just down the I-5 close to Seattle. So I guess if you take that analogy, we'd be Seattle fans, but they're not in it either. So
there you go. Yeah. Yeah. Back in the day, we used to be Buffalo Bills fans too. They never got in anything.
Well, they probably take after me. I tell you right now, if I go and play the Lotto 649 here in Canada, your choices drop automatically to 643. So,
well, so how are things going on the left coast?
well, we're doing pretty well. We haven't had the big rains that they forecast, and I guess it hasn't made it up from California yet. Although they are calling for colder weather and snow, which you know I shouldn't be saying, but I hope it comes because our local mountains are in dire need of snow. Um, so time will tell.
Yeah, you said that if you don't get enough snow, you have drought issue problems.
Yeah, yeah. I know the north part of the province, the northeast part of the province is it was just wicked dry last year. All the big fires up there, and they had a big frost and a big cold snap earlier on in the winter, and the ground froze. So anything that came down has run off, and it's not even it couldn't even get in and soak into the ground. So I think they're going to be in a fire situation again this year. Central part of the island, inevitably they go on to level 4 drought restrictions, which basically says you can think about drinking water, but nothing else. And you got to wonder. Not that I'm a climate change poo-pooer or denier, but boy, if we start missing out and getting this water in here, we're going to be in.
Well, you're not denying anything. Climate changes. There's nothing wrong with that. It just doesn't always change the way politicians would like it to change.
Well, especially if they can raise another tax out of it. Yeah.
Well, especially, yeah. So, what do you think about the latest here in town? Here in Canada, because this particular story is not going to be of much interest to our friends in the U.S. or elsewhere. But the latest saga of the journalists at the second largest TV network in Canada, CTV News, being 4,800 of them being sent home on Friday forever. In other words, they were fired because the company which owns CTV News and CTV is not making enough money to keep 4,800 of its employees employed.
And 500 radio stations or something too, wasn't it?
Well, they did a whole bunch of cuts of radio stations last year. I know the one closest to us here in London just went dark from one day to the next, and that was it. After some 70 years on the air, the station now is an AM outlet, which in and of itself is facing real problems in North America because they're just no one listens to AM radio anymore. That's not true. They just don't have the audience they used to. And
Yeah.
FM is the same happening there. I mean, the layoffs are for a number of reasons, and while we're not experts in the media, we do know that you and I are having a conversation here that can be seen worldwide if people want to. And this technology has basically put that technology, old technologies, AM, FM, and TV, out of business. That's
Very
that. That's really what is the prime motivator of this thing. The other one is that they made a mistake in the news line of basically taking money from the government, some $40 million in subsidies last year. And the people who own it, the shareholders said, well, that's not enough money, to keep this on the air. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
well. Yeah, I think we've talked about that before, with particularly here, with the government putting the money in to fund the media, which I always thought was a slippery slope to take. If you start giving money to various media outlets, and the media outlets do take that funding, at which point do they become beholden to the particular powers that be to follow the party line, so to speak, Uh, and they took $40 million from the government, and still didn't get enough, I guess, to keep the things going. So our illustrious leader, in a very unprime ministerial press release, said it's a garbage decision.
Yeah, well, he's wrong. It's really that simple. And then to start going on about it's going to destroy local news and it's an erosion of democracy and blah blah. That's nonsense. Newspapers used to have a town newspaper. They're long gone. This. You can't buy the press, even though they tried. Uh, some of it was successful to the extent that a little community papers still published eight or 10 pages of the local hockey team or what have you, and most
Yeah,
of it in our town here, our local paper is ads for the grocery stores and the hardware stores and whatever is as fillers in the paper, but the actual paper itself is 6 pages of some news locally. It's a weekly.
yeah,
Okay.
same as ours. Yeah, we've got the weekly thing. Although, living where we do, and the controversy that we have continually ongoing locally with whether we should go to a municipal police force or maintain RCMP and municipal policing, it's sort of come off the headlines now, but every now and then it rears its head, and we get more things now. I don't know if I don't know if it'll make national news or not, but there's a developer wants to take a section of the city here that was a pet cemetery and build homes on it, not taking into account Stephen King's book. But like, we can't make this stuff up. But
No, I guess not. But it's reminiscent of the government interfering in places where they really should not tread. I mean, you remember the craziness about again, Canadians will know this, when the Rogers Shaw amalgamation was being promoted by the government. This, and to suggest that they would okay it because journalism was really the thing that they were looking at, which is nonsense. Rogers and Shaw had little interest in journalism. They shut down their exactly. I mean, come on, it's a business. The big business of both of them was internet and streaming services. They could care less about journalism and the news things. It was, and if the Trudeau government was prepared to give them subsidies, they just took it as a gift. Okay, and then thank you very much, and went on their way, and that was that.
that's
So
all gone through now, and it turns out that Rogers is not doing as well as they thought, because all of a sudden they had third quarter profits were down.
well, the saying, you can't fool all the people all the time. That's what's happened here. They're just you know finding out that people see through this stuff, and the election coming up, which will happen, if the country holds together long enough for it, it's going to be in these media types, whatever's left of them, will be inundated with money from the government, telling us how wonderful everything is, and they've all the successful things they've done.
Or
Uh,
conversely, the other side of the coin is how terrible this government has been and how we can do better.
well, yeah, I know, but I mean the adage that you never bite the hand that feeds you is going to very much come through on this level of interference by the government, because that's what they're going to do. Or they'll post it as PSAs, public service announcements, which we know is all nonsense. And so they're going to be talking about journalism, but there's no journalism involved here. They're going to be bought off, and I think it's the day of the old bunch, and the sort of relationship between the government and media is very much being questioned. I mean, we're doing it here, and it's laughable that these people still think that we sit around waiting for the 6 o'clock news to be told what we should know is going on. It's just nonsense. So
Well, and that's true. And it goes back to government. When governments used to talk in millions of dollars on this and that and the other thing, and then they became comfortable with talking about billions of dollars for this, that, and the other thing. And now they're starting to toy with the idea that, well, trillions might not be too bad.
yeah.
And I have no idea what comes after trillions, but I'm sure
But
they'll come up.
yeah, but they need that money. I mean, look at here again. The Trudeau government is going to raise the carbon tax by 23% on April 1st. 23%. So you don't think that's going to be passed on to the truckers and the farmers and the people who grow food, the people that transport it, the people that sell it. This guy and his gang, sorry, are essentially the key reason inflation will be continued in 2023, 24, 25, 26. He started in 23 after the post COVID era, and now we're going into 24, and he's going to continue to do it right up until if he's stays in power, bankrupts the place.
Well, I don't think we're too far from that anyway, but yeah.
Well,
That's what I say. They look at any budget. Look at our neighbors to the south, where they're talking trillions of dollars to keep the government operating and to give money to various and sundry countries. And I'm pretty sure it's the same in Europe with the EU and their maybe not trillions of dollars, but certainly trillions of euros or pounds or whatever you want to call it. There's just no. I don't understand $1 trillion. I don't. I know it's got a lot of zeros behind it. And I'm coming to the realization that those zeros are probably the politicians and not actual numbers. But
yeah, but you want something else that's fun? Speaking of you can't grasp numbers. The federal government is talking about spending $300 million to make all the Emergency Act documents bilingual because they're not in French. Did you know that? Privy Council office just put that out yesterday, that they're going to spend $300 million to get all that stuff translated.
I wonder which company's going to get that, and whether it's going to be like the Rive scam contract, where some company's going to have to bill this out and take 50% of the money to, well, 300 million. That's $150 million to source it out to somebody who knows how to do Google Translate.
Well, there is a pattern developing here, though, with respect to the people who make these decisions. So if you look at what's happened over the last year and a half with a lot of the same folks, like our illustrious prime minister in this country, whether it's Boris Johnson in the UK, he resigned. He figured out, yeah, my life is short. Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, she's discovered her time is up, left. That guy in the Netherlands, Mark Rutte or whatever his name was, he pulled the pin. Even the Bennett, the Israeli president, he decided, nah, I can't press this. We're out of here. So, there is a trend developing. Whether the fella in Ottawa believes it's time for him to go yet on his own volition rather than being kicked out of office by the electorate, who's to say? But there
Well, I
is
guess
there is
he's got
stuff
that
happening.
vote, maybe they'll buy this story and I'll get back in power. But nah, I don't know. I never say never. The great unwashed masses tend to do things that surprise me.
Yeah, well, what surprised me yesterday, was it yesterday or day before, that the president of the United States declared that Mexico was going to fix the border in Gaza. He was talking to the president of Mexico about the border in Gaza, and everybody's eyes were rolling in their head, saying, what is this man talking about?" So things are pretty strange all over. This is just the recent news. We're
Hey, I don't want to speak ill of anybody because we've got younger leaders here that are perhaps just as inane. But at what point, if they used to say, law enforcement, you had to retire at 60, maybe 65, judges, you had to read, doctors, you have to, pilots, you have to. Why isn't there a limit for politicians? Like, just because you're old doesn't mean you're wise.
Oh, that's true.
I know we're getting into dangerous territories here because we're fairly old.
Yeah, because we would be seen as ancient by some people who are watching this or hearing what we're essentially gossiping about at this point. But it is rather frightening, I guess, is the word that comes to mind, that a president of the United States is demonstrating serious cognitive shortfalls.
Issues. Yeah.
And the same media that's falling apart in this country, in the US, is circling the wagons on them, saying, "Oh, no, this everybody does that." What are you talking about? Everybody does that. Everybody doesn't do that. They take away your driver's license if you are showing signs of dementia, or if you've had a stroke or serious brain surgery. Mm-hmm. But this gentleman is still the president of the United States.
Well, I have no idea how the Constitution works and whether he could step aside and you would end up with the first female president. I don't know. It goes well beyond my comprehension, and I don't pretend to follow it that closely anyway. I mean, it's interesting, but the reality is, whatever happens, I have no control over. I can't even say that I have any control over what would happen to a vote here in Canada, because where we live in Western Canada, by the time the polls close in your neck of the wood, the government's determined. Really, it doesn't matter what we vote on. So,
well, that's true. That the system itself is in need. Certainly, the system in Canada, the first past the post concept, is a dated one. And the gentleman who is in charge of the government at the moment promised in 2015 he's going to change that. And within weeks, he jettisoned that idea, and he knew damn well why.
probability is that there would never be another government majority ever again. But
well, certainly not one that you could cook on the basis of first past the post in 3 urban centers, and then the rest of the country be damned. So I mean, that's the problem we have at the moment, and the tiptoeing around it by everybody in power is amazing. We don't want to talk about the fact that once as you say, the Laurentian Triangle, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa votes, that's how we're going to go, whether you like it or not, whether Eastern Canada or Western Canada likes it. That's where the power base is, and although my feeling on that is that the power base is eroding fairly quickly, and so is the support, the emotional support, if you will, which is always about politics for these guys. So I don't know if once you're out of the GTA and in the Greater Toronto area, or out of Montreal or Ottawa, the folks who are getting kind of fed up with this elitist bunch running the show, I think we're getting there. There are some, pardon me, signs that that's changing. The question is, for us just sitting here chatting over the fence, whether the country will hold together long enough for that change to occur in a logical and reliable fashion. In other words, an election that just doesn't keep the status quo going, and then after that, the rest of folks who don't get a chance to be involved. So, you know what, we're done with this, and off we go. And we talked about this, last week, about how it doesn't take much for an empire or a company or a corporation to fall apart quickly because of a couple of bad decisions. We can do the historical thing and say, well, Rome fell apart. Yeah, but it took 1,000 years to build it, and it took 200 years to go out of business. How many corporations can you list that no longer exist today? Okay, because they were either overtaken by events or technology, or just lousy management. Okay, there's no such thing as Trans World Airlines anymore. There's no such thing as Frigidaire anymore. We can make a long list. That's not the point. Is the governments are the same as well, I think, if they don't pay attention, and so are the teams that run those governments, whether they're center, left, right, or whatever. If they get too set in their ways and do not listen to the people, or take the temperature of the environment on those various economic, social, and cultural levels, they're out of business. And you can't just say, well, we have to stay in business as a country or as a region or as an entity because we have to. No, you don't have to, because in fact, if you continue to do what you're doing now, you're cutting your throat collectively. And so there's a lot of folks who spend a lot more time and are much smarter than we are, who say, that the Union in the US and Confederation Canada are held together by thin threads right now, simply because the people who are entrusted with making sure that this functions for the benefit of everyone. And in other words, you serve the people, not the people serving you, which seems to be what's happening with this bunch.
That seems to have gone by the wayside, but and you bring up an interesting point. I haven't heard very much what's happening on the southern border.
We're stalemate over Texas and 26 states in the federal government, over whose interests are being served, and whose interests are being protected. We can speak at length at whose interests are being served by having a non-functioning immigration, refugee, migration program, but whose interests are being protected is pretty clear, or should be protected, and that is where they are I think they're at the crossroads of, okay, so what do you do? We're looking in from the outside, but we shouldn't get too smug here. Because this country has more immigrants per capita coming in for any country than any country in the world. Okay, this is absurd, and exactly, and we know from anecdotal and even direct evidence that there's a lot of folks who just haven't got anything to do when they get here. there's no homes for them, there's no jobs for them, all that stuff. I mean, we don't, anybody who wants to look it up can do it themselves. We don't have to be sitting here regurgitating all the bad news on how this isn't working out. But I think the more corrosive part of this is that you are putting in a lot of uh, new ideas brought in by people from around the world that aren't exactly connected to the host community's traditions, values, and expectations of what a civil society is supposed to be. So the overwhelming numbers in the urban areas, because this is patchy. It's not like you have a sort of homogenous group across the country, both in the U.S. and Canada. These large numbers of newcomers are in the urban centers,
Very
and
true.
they're
Yeah.
okay. And what you're doing is you are causing displacement of the, I'll use the word indigenous people of those communities, because you are basically taking entire cities and flipping them on their heads uh, as crime goes up, as unemployment goes up, as stores close. I mean, there's all sorts of bad news, but it's concentrated in the urban cores, and these are not really felt, not being felt sort of coast to coast to coast, as they have to say. You're being felt in the urban centers, and those urban centers are in turmoil. And
Yeah. Yeah. And
it,
on top of that, to talk about money and throwing money around, didn't the federal government here just put out a big promise to put 300 and some odd $1 million into homes for refugees? And I'm thinking, yeah, I live in a home. I'm fortunate, I guess. It's ours for the time being. That I don't have to worry about that. But if I was, an immigrant here or a citizen born here, and I can't afford a house, I'm going to get really upset with that. So I own a house and I'm upset with it. And why are we not looking at, let's fix our own problems first and then worry about perhaps people that shouldn't be here and around the world? Yeah, I'm having some problems with that.
yeah, and I think you are not alone. I think there's a lot of us are seriously wondering just exactly where does this end. And it's very much like there was an article by Conrad Black in today's National Post, which is a sort of a coast to coast paper in Canada, admittedly to right of center or conservative paper. And no, he's a very successful fellow, but he's no pal of the left or the liberals. Nonetheless, he wrote that the country is really teetering on the edge of he didn't say collapse, but I'll use that term because it's given away all of its jewels, if you will, in industry. It's opened up its warehouses to people who will pilfer it. It's got unserious people running the show, and that's the sort of the short version of a very long article. And I read it, and I thought, if Canada was a patient who was just diagnosed with terminal stage 4 cancer, and the diagnosis is terminal to that, this would be the kind of sort of a parallel uh, analogy, if you will, or to what the writer um, was trying to express. He was much more eloquent than I am on this, but I'm more brutal because I really have problems with the way uh, the the country's being dealt with by its leadership at the moment. It's a poorly run corporation which is spending its money on things it doesn't need, to impress people it really doesn't care much about, if the truth were known. So change will come, but will it come in time for?
Yeah, and that's a bit of a worry. It very, very much so. Although, the old adage that politicians and baby diapers need to be changed, and often for the same reason. I think we've reached that point where, certainly in this country, the diaper is well beyond being full, and it's
Oh, that's
time for
very,
a change.
yeah. Well, that's a very stinky ending to this episode. So who's gonna win tomorrow, Super Bowl?
Well, I'm going to pick a big. It'll be the one that scores the most points.
You are a politician.
I have.
Said something but meant nothing.
I'm going to stick. I'm gonna put my 2 cents down on Kansas City.
Okay. Okay.
Just
Well, just to be
controversial,
no, what's the other word? Contrary.
adversarial.
Contrary.
Oh,
I'll put 2 cents on Buffalo Bills. Oh, wait a minute, they're not in this. Ooh, that's
I
bad.
win. I win.
So I'll go with San Francisco because they have a nice logo on their hat, as my daughter likes to say.
Well, that's what got Skippy elected, wasn't it?
Okay, now you're going to have to explain in the next episode of the BORDERPOL Journal who that person is.
Well, if we can bring people back, we'll try anything.
Okay, well, listen, to our viewers, this has been the Canadian edition of the BORDERPOL Journal, because we certainly didn't go very far internationally. But we'll see you next week. Don't forget to like. If you have any good ideas on what we should be talking about the next couple of episodes, let us know.
Yes.
BORDERPOL at borderpol.org. And if you support us, you can always use that QR code in the bottom right-hand corner and buy us coffee. And that cuts some of our costs down here a bit. So until next week, Bob.
Yeah.
And then you can get one of us owes somebody else 2 cents.
Yeah. Have fun.
You too. Take care.